Hello and welcome to the Lend Hoping Nothing podcast. I'm Michael Humphreys, and this is episode 20. I've made it pretty far, I guess. But today I kind of want to talk about the way. So one of the main problems in Usury is that there is a difference between the mutuum contract, which is central to the problem of usury, and a sale or exchange contract. And so that's kind of what I want to discuss today. And it's come out of some insights in reading Aquinas on restitution. And before I get into that, though, I kind of wanted to give a little update on the PhD stuff. So PhD... sounding like the podcast is not gonna cover things, which is probably for the best. It seems like they want some sort of official organized talks, which need to be face to face. I don't know how that works with a webinar, but maybe the webinars aren't face to face. So, it is what it is. But I'm still going to do this because it's helpful for me to talk about what I'm thinking and to put it in words and try to explain it to other people. So, kind of related to this, as part of that PhD is been diving deeper into Aquinas and exploring things, and especially here talking about restitution as an act of justice. And I just got off a call earlier today with a PhD, a Dominican who has a PhD both in economics and I don't remember if he said philosophy or theology, but he said he studied the economics of Aquinas and wrote and has written on usury as well. And so he's the one who really brought up this notion that there's not a real clear distinction in the way that we differentiate between a sales contract or exchange and a mutuum. And I feel like I've gotten to the kind of the point where I am comfortable saying that the mutuum is not an exchange. And that's what I kind of want to talk about. So, first thing, now, restitution. So the way that Aquinas talks about restitution is it's returning or restoring something of someone else's that you've taken. But Aquinas considers this in two ways. He considers this restitution of something taken voluntarily and something taken involuntarily. So the way we typically will think about restitution is with respect to like theft. And so let me just make sure I didn't push a button here. Okay, I think we're good. With theft, there's a need to restore or restitute the thing that was stolen. So if you stole someone's television or car or something, it's an act of justice that's required to return that back to them as near as possible, if you still have it. But also usury, because usury, is a form of theft. You're taking what belongs to someone else. So, but also he talks about restitution with respect to voluntary taking. So, the lender in a mutuum voluntarily hands it over to the borrower. And so there's a categorical difference there, but they still fall under the notion of restitution, restoring what belongs to another. And so Aquinas considers, when he talks about restitution in question 62, he talks about restituting possession or ownership. And so in the case of theft, if you still possess it, you're going to give that same thing back. And it's going to be, a restitution of possession. Like you've taken possession of it, and now you need to return that. However, if you have sold it, then you need to restitute ownership of it, which is, kind of a fuller thing. You have to kind of, the way that he kind of talks about it, or the words he uses, are you kind of have to build it back up. But there's this distinction between restituting something in possession or in ownership. And so Aquinas considers not only the mutuum, but he considers a depositum, which is just it's like a safety box deposit. So you're giving a good to somebody who is going to hold it and preserve it for you. And then when you want it back, he restitutes it to you. He restores possession of it. And that's what actually completes the contract. And it's an act of justice. This is an act of justice of the contract. And so the mutuum is also this, but it's a restitution with respect to ownership. Now, we can move beyond this, because he doesn't specifically say this, but he does. But if we consider the Roman law contract of comodatum, which is it's also known as the loan of use. So you give something to someone to use for a while. And so it's kind of like a book loan, or like my neighbor, like a month ago, he gave me, I was trying to cut down my tree, and he gave me one of his electric saws to kind of help cut the branches. And so that was a comodatum. He let me use his property for a time and expected me to return it to him. And return the exact same thing. Not to restitute ownership, but to restitute possession. And this becomes a very distinguishing feature between these types of contracts. So restituting ownership versus possession. So, and this is all kind of in question 62, the second part of the second part, question 62, article 1. So we're there. So the comodatum, the depositum, the mutuum, they're all restitutions. Now the comodatum, the depositum, those are restitutions of possession, whereas the mutuum is a restitution of ownership. So then the question is like, well, where is a sale or exchange in this? And the answer is that a sale or exchange is not a restitution, because you don't give back what you received in a sale. You get back something different. And this is an essential difference between a sale and a mutuum, or really any loan like this. So there's this kind of difference here. But one of the things that we know is that a comodatum can become a lease. Now, one of the recent passages that I have discovered and been working on is it's in Quod Libet 3, question 7, article 3, I think. I might be getting those wrong. But there's a question in Usury on the Quod Libet, number 3. And there he very explicitly works this out, and he says, in a comodatum, you are granting the use to someone, and they restore it back identically. They restitute possession. And so what is granted is something apart from what is restituted. So you can charge for the use, because the use is something apart from the ownership which you retained, and it's apart from the possession which you are restituted as an act of justice. And so the use there is something that you can enter into an exchange for, and you can ask a price for it. And so the mutuum is a gratuitous contract, and indeed the depositum originally also a gratuitous contract, mutuum also a gratuitous contract, because a contract which is ruled exclusively by an act of restitution is necessarily gratuitous, because if it is governed solely by an act of restitution, then you only receive back that which you gave. There is no profit, there is no more. So these contracts that are gratuitous are also purely contracts of restitution in the sense. Like, there's obviously differences between you get ownership, or you get use, or you're holding it for a person, but they're necessarily gratuitous because they're governed solely by restitution. Like, that's the act of justice that completes them. You might get into questions of other liabilities and things involved, but usually that involves some sort of defect or in the agreement. So like if you're borrowing someone's good, then and it's damaged when you return it, then there's something additional there that you need to restitute. But we'll get into that into a moment. So getting back to this comodatum, so you can sell the use. And so the lease is a type of exchange, because the difference between exchange and these gratuitous loans is that a exchange is a this for that. It's an actual, exchange. Whereas a loan, whether it's a mutuum or a commoditum or depositum, it's really a this restored later. So I'm going to give you my sword, is the example Aquinas uses, in a deposit to be restored later when I ask for it. So it's this restored later, not a this for that. So when you get into a lease, what makes it an exchange is not the restitution, the receiving back, because you're just receiving back what's already yours, what you already own, and it's restoring that possession, and that possession is implied by the ownership in a way. Now the exchange part of it is that you're exchanging that right to use for a price. And so that is this for that. So the lease is an interesting case because it involves both a restitution, returning possession to the original owner, but also an exchange, because it's a price for that right to use for a time. So there's that. What makes it an exchange is that price paid. Now, the question that Aquinas asks, and the way he defines usury is a price for use of money. And it's very much paralleled with this idea of the comodatum and the lease. So in the mutuum, you are granting ownership entirely, and that is actually what is restored to you. So there's not anything apart from the ownership once you've handed it over. Like the borrower has full control over it and full ownership of it. You don't retain any rights to it or any claim to it. And so then the question is, well, can you charge for the use? And kind of parallel to this lease idea, I think. And the answer is no, because the mutuum is not only wholly governed by an act of restitution, there's nothing else to be governed. Like in the comodatum, that loan of use, yeah, you're granting possession for it to be used for a time, but you receive the possession back. But you can still charge for that use as something apart from that ownership you retained. In the mutuum, you just hand over the whole thing. There's nothing else to be restituted. So, but that is a big difference between those different contracts. And so the way I've been kind of able to order this in understanding those bailments, as they're called, the comodatum and the depositum, the mutuum, and then the sale, is in the comodatum and the depositum. What is restored is sort of the full substance of the thing. So the thing that you gave is restored to you. Like as far as property rights, you still own it and all of that. But the thing is restored in possession to you. And because it's been, because of that ownership, the substance has to remain. So it has to be returned identically. And so the substance is returned. Now this, because you're returning the substance, the thing itself, this necessarily implies that there is a equality of the substance, but also an equality in the qualities. So the powers of the thing, like its colors, and the electric saw, it has certain electric powers and so forth, and then also its quantity. So it's the same thing. Maybe if you were given a collection of things, you return all of them, and so forth. So in justice, there's an equality in substance, which implies an equality in qualities. And here I'm talking like metaphysical qualities, or I think natural philosophy. But what I mean here by qualities are like the accident of qualities. So the thing's powers and so forth. And then an equality in quantity. Now, the defects that may happen in that act of restitution could be from having lost the whole thing, like it's just gone, and then you have to restitute the whole thing. That's not essential to the contract, it's a defect in the contract. Another defect would be a defect in the quality. So there's not an equality in the qualities. So if I returned the electric saw and it was broken, the motor didn't work anymore, I would have to restitute that. I would have to fix it or ensure that that was restored in some way. Or if you had a collection of things, and here I'm going to struggle. So like in a depositum, you deposit some 50 rare coins or something, and you're missing one. Or if you had like a painting and part of it was torn off or something, like it would be the same thing, but it would not be the whole thing. It'd be a defect in the quantity. So in these bailments, where the restitution is in possession and not ownership, you have an equality of substance, quantity, and quality. Now, in the mutuum, there is a restitution of ownership. So here, we can't restitute the substance because the substance has been used up. It's gone. That's what the whole meaning of consumed is. And, consumed not only in the sense of physically destroyed or eaten or whatever, but also consumed in the sense of alienated, sold. It's no longer with the borrower. So, what do we do about the equality of justice? How is this contract just? You restore the good in qualities, metaphysical qualities, its powers and so forth, and quantity. So you need equality in quality and equality in quantities. Now, what equality in qualities, it's a terrible thing. I wish I knew a different language or spoke a different language where I could distinguish between like quality and how good a thing is versus quality as in, Aristotle's accidents of quality. So quality here implies, something of the same kind, because quality goes to the essence of a thing. And metaphysicians out there can explain that better than I can. But it also means that its qualities and its powers such that it's fungible. And here's where we get into the idea of fungibility, because you want the thing returned so there's an equality in use. Now, before the bailments, there's an equality in substance or being. Here now we've moved to an equality of use or equality of qualities. And so even within the contract, there can be some agreement about what qualities actually matter. So like if I lent in a mutuum my lawnmower so that my friend could sell it and he could do whatever, with the money, whatever he needed, and he restored it to me and it was a different color, like I don't care about the color as far as a lawnmower goes as long as it works the same. So there are certain qualities that are important and maybe certain qualities that aren't. And then also, I was recently thinking that this notion of fungibility, I think, is even present in St. Thomas Aquinas, because he talks about the difference between gold and kind of like alchemist's gold. And so he talks about, where was that? I thought it was in the things. It's in the question 77. Yes, here it is. And he talks about question 77, article 2, reply to objection 1. And so he talks about how, let's see here, hence if the gold or silver produced by alchemists has not the true specific nature of gold and silver, the sale therefore is fraudulent and unjust, especially as real gold and silver can produce certain results by their natural actions, which the counterfeit gold and silver of alchemists cannot produce. Thus, the true metal has the property of making people joyful, and it's helpful. Moreover, real gold can be employed more frequently. Here we are. If, however, real gold were to be produced by alchemy, it would not be unlawful to sell it for the genuine article, for nothing prevents art from employing certain natural causes for the production of natural and true effects. So here I kind of see him kind of open up to this idea of fungible, like alchemist's gold, if it can do the same things as real gold. He does say real gold there, so maybe my point is less strong than I thought. But if it can do the same things, then they're essentially interchangeable. So, but that is the idea of like the fungibility, is that there's this equality between the qualities or powers of the thing. It can be used for the same stuff. And within the contract, maybe you care about some qualities more than others. So, you give someone a circular thing, and they return the same sort of thing, but it's square, and like, who cares what the shape is? So, and then, okay. So then in the mutuum, there's a certain equality in the quality and the quantity. Now there's a difference here because you have a different substance. It's not exactly an equality of use in the qualities. It's a kind of an adequation. So you're not necessarily going to be able to give a thing that has exactly the same powers and use as another thing, as the thing they gave. But there's an adequation, an approximation, and that's where this fungibility is. So two individuals may not have the exact metaphysically identical uses, but there's an equivalence or an adequation between them with respect to the quality. And then there's an equality in the quantity. That's kind of like the fundamental thing. And Aquinas even says in the case of restitution, there is an exact equality between what is taken and what is restored. And that's 62 Article 3. There he kind of talks about the distinction between the act of restitution and then the act of punishment. So like a thief who steals something, not only does he restore what he stole, but also he has to suffer some punishment. And so the restitution is the equality. And so now if we move down to the sale or exchange, what we have here is we don't have an equality of substance or quality, because we want to exchange this for that. And we're exchanging for different kinds of things, because if I already had something that can do X, I don't need to exchange it for another thing that can do X for that reason that it can do X. So, if I have some tinder that's made of oak or something, I'm not going to exchange it for some other, some tinder made from maple or some other thing that's equivalent in its use. I'm going to want to exchange something I have for something different in such a way that I have something that does something else for me, because that's what I need. And so then what you're left with is an equality of quantity. Now the issue here though is, what kind of quantity are we making equal? Because you have now diverse things. Like Aristotle says in the Nicomachean Ethics, Book 5, Chapter 5, when he's discussing money, he says, well, what is, or how many shoes is a house? And he brings that up as a central problem in this equality, because no one thinks one shoe is equal to one house. And so it's not an equality of of equality of sort of the unity of substances is what I would refer to that as. Rather, it's he has to ask, well, why do we engage in exchange at all? and we engage in exchange because you have what I need and I have what you need. And so the measure of equality then becomes need or desire. And so from that, we get money, which acts as a measure to be able to bring them into equality as quantity. So much value or so much desire. And so there's a certain equality there of quantity now between these diverse things. And so there's this interesting way of divvying up these different contracts based on restitution, whether it's there or not, whether what kind of restitution is, whether it's ownership or possession. And then in the sale in particular, there's so and then how the equality is established. So in the bailments, there is a sort of complete equality that you're returning the exact same thing in its being, in its powers, in its quantity. Whereas when you get to the mutuum, you're returning the use of the thing almost. Like you're restoring ownership of a particular being, but the restitution is almost a restitution of use. It's not quite that, because really you're restoring the ownership, but there's the equality necessary for the proper restitution is inequality, because this is going to be so hard to say. You have to return something of equal quality or goodness, of equal. I need a thesaurus. Something of an equal utility, or it can perform the same thing to the same degree. So you can't return a gallon for a gallon of milk, a gallon of spoiled milk, for example, is the example I came up with. Because even though they're kind of the same in kind, they're not the same in quality or goodness. So yeah, I think that is a way of categorizing these sort of kind of basic contracts. When you get into things that are more complicated, it becomes a little bit more difficult. But I think when you get into more complicated things, it actually becomes more obviously just a matter of exchange. Like the census contract is generally treated as a sale, as an exchange, because it's an exchange of property rights for a price, essentially. So that's kind of the stuff I'm still working through. I probably didn't present all of that in a perfectly coherent way, but this still kind of helps me figure out the best way to articulate it. So, yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about today. I think it's going to be very valuable, and I think that's going to be the topic that I'm going to submit to the American Maritime Association meeting, because the meeting is on the range of reason, and it's sort of looking at the intelligibility of being that especially that modernity will not look at. And so I think there is a good way of being able to, because a lot of economists don't think about contracts in their distinctions in this kind of fundamental way. It's more like just, well, everything's exchange. And even the economist PhD I was talking about, he just, well, mutuum is obviously an economic exchange. And I was like, I don't think so. I don't think that works. I think fundamentally the mutuum is not an exchange. There are economic goods involved, but it is not an exchange. It's no more an exchange than a library loan. That's kind of where I would put it. So, so I think I might submit that. I rambled on here for 35 or so minutes, and it's got to be at least 25. So I think I can get a 25-minute paper out of it. So anyway, thank you for listening, and have a nice day. If you have any questions, of course, always feel free to email me, lendhopingnothing@gmail.com. Leave a comment below. Tell me why I'm wrong. I'm always happy to hear from people, because whenever I have a chance to talk to people about this, it really gets the gears going. So, yeah, I would really appreciate any feedback, or even if just tell me I'm wrong, because it helps me, think about where I'm wrong, and how to address those objections. That's been my whole thing studying Usury, has been just okay, well, Aquinas is right. I think he's right. Here's an objection. Well, if Aquinas is right, then how do I understand that objection or respond to it? What are maybe the fallacies that are involved in that objection, or whatever? So, and it's always really helped me clarify my thinking. So, have at it, I guess. Anyways, have a nice day, and talk to you later.